In a town where everyone knows each other, secrets don't stay secret for long. But when Jaden fell off a ladder and ended up in the clinic of the stern Dr. Carter, he had no idea that this visit would turn his whole life upside down. Betrayal, fear, and love that society is not ready to accept. Now he will have to fight not only for his health, but also for the right to be himself. People in Hollow Creek said nothing ever changed. Same old Friday nights at the diner, same gossip circling like clockwork. I used to find comfort in that rhythm. Predictable, steady, safe, until the morning I fell and landed in the one place that would rip open everything I'd kept buried. It was a stormy Monday, the kind that rattled barns and left ladders slick with rain. I was 28, running my uncle's farm mostly alone, and too stubborn to wait for help. One slip was all it took. My boots skidded, the ladder twisted, and my back hit the ground hard enough to steal the air from my chest. For a minute, I couldn't move. My pride said, walk it off, but the pain in my hip said otherwise. By the time my neighbor Cole showed up, I was limping so bad he stopped dead in the mud. Jesus, Jaden, you look wrecked. He offered to drive me to the clinic, and I spat out the usual line. I'm fine. But Cole wasn't buying it. He kept after me until I snapped, grabbed my jacket, and headed for town. Hollow Creek had one doctor, Dr. Carter, ex-military, mid-40s, and built a reputation as the man you went to when you wanted answers fast and no small talk. I'd only crossed paths with him once, years back, when he stitched my hand after a barbed wire gash. He hadn't cracked a smile, hadn't even looked at me longer than necessary, just barked, "You'll live. Keep it clean, cold, efficient, unforgettable." So when I limped into that faded white clinic, my stomach was already in knots. The receptionist scribbled my name, waved me to a chair. A minute later, heavy boots echoed down the hall. And then there he was, broad-shouldered, sleeves rolled, eyes sharp like nothing ever surprised him. "Back injury?" he asked, not wasting a second. "Yeah," I muttered. He just turned and I followed. My chest thudded harder than the ache in my hip. Inside the exam room, he pointed to the table. "Sit." No wasted words. I obeyed, hissing as my back protested. He asked what happened. I told him. Ladder, rain, fall. He nodded once, jotting something quick before moving closer. "Stand," he said. "Bend forward." I did, gritting my teeth, his hands pressed against my spine, firm, steady. "Any numbness?" "No." He crouched, tapped my reflexes, then straightened. "On all fours," he said calmly. "Need to check alignment." I froze. "What?" "All fours, hands and knees. You landed hard." The heat rushed to my ears. It was ridiculous, just medical procedure. But every nerve in me lit up. Still I obeyed, lowering myself slow, the paper lining crackling under my palms. His hands moved along my back, precise, reading every inch of bone and muscle like a map. Professional, controlled, and yet not mechanical. "Breathe," he murmured when my shoulders locked. I exhaled, forcing myself to relax, but the pounding in my chest didn't ease. "You've got a mild displacement," he said finally. "Soreness will last a few days. I'll wrap it. Ice. Anti-inflammatories." I sat back up, avoiding his eyes, pulse still erratic. He didn't comment, just grabbed the wrap, leaned in, and began binding it tight around my waist. His fingers brushed my skin with each pass, clinical but grounding. "You'll manage," he said. "Guess so." My voice cracked anyway. For a long second, he studied me. Not the injury, me. And it unsettled me more than the fall itself. I left the clinic slower than I'd come in, not because of pain, but because something about that room clung to me. The way he said breathe, the steadiness in his hands, the silence heavy with things neither of us dared to say. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on my porch listening to rain on the tin roof, thinking of his eyes, of how one look from him felt more dangerous than any fall. And I hated myself for wanting to go back. I told myself I wouldn't go back to the clinic unless the pain got worse. That was the plan. But the next morning I caught myself driving into town with no excuse except a folded prescription in my pocket. My hip still throbbed, but that wasn't what pulled me there. The waiting room was empty. A bell rang when I stepped in, and a minute later his boots sounded down the hall. Dr. Carter appeared, eyes steady, like he already knew why I'd come. Back still bad, he asked. Wrap feels too tight, I lied. He studied me for a beat. Follow me. Instead of the exam room, he led me through a side door into a small break space. Bare walls, a table, a humming coffee pot. He gestured to a chair. Sit, I'll check it. I lowered myself, trying not to show how hard my chest was pounding. He knelt, fingers working the bandage loose. His hands were firm, deliberate. When he was done, he didn't move away. Better? Yeah, I said, though the wrap wasn't the problem. He poured 2 mugs of coffee, slid one toward me. Preventive medicine, he said, almost dry. We drank in silence. The only sound was the machine sputtering behind him. I wanted to ask why he'd brought me back here, why this didn't feel like a doctor and patient anymore. Instead, I blurted, I thought about knocking last night. His eyes flicked up. No surprise, just quiet recognition. I saw you, he said. My breath caught. You stood out there for a while, then left. I didn't know what I'd say, I admitted. You don't always need words. The air thickened. My hands tightened on the mug. He leaned back slightly, watching me with an expression I couldn't read. And then he said low, I didn't move here because I wanted to. I moved here because I had to. I frowned. What do you mean? He didn't answer right away, just stared at the table, jaw tense. Finally, he said, City, long relationship, fell apart in ways I couldn't fix. I left because staying would have broken me. The words hit me harder than I expected. I'd never heard him speak like that. Not clipped, not clinical, just raw. For the first time, I realized he wasn't untouchable. He was carrying his own wreckage. Something twisted in my chest. So you came here to disappear. Quiet is easier, he said. People don't ask questions. I stared at him. Does it feel like peace? His eyes met mine. No, just smaller. The silence that followed burned hotter than anything else, because that was me too, shrinking day by day, laughing at the right times, never letting anyone look too close, pretending it was safety. I wanted to say it out loud, that I'd been hiding, that I was tired of it. But the words stuck. All I managed was, you don't talk like that with most people, do you? No, he said simply. Our eyes held. The space between us charged. My pulse hammered so loud it felt reckless to stay sitting there. Then the door creaked. The receptionist's voice called down the hall. Doctor? Just like that, the spell snapped. Carter stood, grabbed both mugs, rinsed them in the sink. His shoulders squared back into that military posture, walls slamming shut. I'll adjust your prescription. Pick it up tomorrow. I nodded, throat tight, and left. But walking down Main Street, I felt the weight of his words echoing inside me. Smaller, not safer. And for the first time in years, I wondered if maybe I wasn't the only one in this town hiding behind quiet. 2 days later, everything started to crack. It began at the feed store. I'd gone in for grain and left with whispers chasing me to the parking lot. A couple of men I'd known since high school stood by the counter, grinning too wide, speaking just loud enough for me to hear. By the time I reached my truck, my stomach was a knot. In a town like Hollow Creek, gossip traveled faster than rainwater down a ditch. That night, Cole stopped by the barn, shifting his weight from boot to boot like he had something to confess. Jaden, he said quietly, you should know. People are talking. I froze. Talking about what? He didn't meet my eyes. About you. About Carter. Somebody says they saw you two in the clinic. Says it didn't look like a doctor's visit. My chest went cold. Who? Cole shrugged helplessly. Doesn't matter. You know how this town is. They're calling you. He cut himself off. I didn't ask him to finish. I already knew. By morning, the looks had started. At the diner, at the gas station. People I'd worked beside for years suddenly had nothing to say to me. My mother called, voice sharp with something halfway between fear and shame. Tell me it isn't true, she demanded. Tell me you're not doing this to yourself. I held the phone so tight it hurt. Doing what? You know what? With that man, in a place like this, what will people think? The words hit harder than the fall from the ladder. You think I'm an embarrassment? I think you're making a mistake. And then she hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, staring at the dead phone, feeling the walls close in. For years I'd hidden, played my part, hoping it would make me invisible. It hadn't. All it had done was leave me defenseless when the truth came out. By noon, Cole sent another message. They're saying Carter took advantage of you. They're trying to make it sound dirty. I drove straight to the clinic. Carter was at his desk writing something when I came in. He looked up, reading my face instantly. You heard, he said. Everyone has, I snapped. They're tearing you apart. They're saying things about me, about us, that... My voice broke. He stood slowly but didn't come closer. Sit down. No, I'm not hiding in here while they drag your name through the mud. I've been through worse, he said evenly. I'm not worried about me. That's not the point. My hands shook. I can handle whispers, but they're acting like you're some predator. Like we... His jaw tightened. This is why I left the city. Not because it was safer, but because I was tired of being the target of other people's fear. But it doesn't stop. Not here. Not anywhere. I stared at him. So what, we just let them win? Crawl back into our holes? He exhaled slowly. No, but we have to be smart. Right now you're angry. They'll use that. They'll twist it. I wanted to argue, but the words wouldn't come. All I could see was my mother's face, the men at the feed store, Cole's warning. I don't regret what happened, Carter said quietly. Not for a second, but you have to decide if you can live with this, because once they decide what story they're going to tell, it's not easy to change it. The room seemed to tilt. I'd spent my whole life trying to be careful, trying not to give anyone a reason, and now here I was, exposed anyway. I can't go back, I said. Not after this. Not after you. His eyes softened, but his shoulders stayed tense. Then we stand our ground, but we do it on our terms. I nodded, though my throat felt raw. Outside the clinic window, two figures lingered on the sidewalk, pretending to check their phones while staring inside. Watching. For the first time, I didn't look away. By the end of the week, Hollow Creek had turned its back. Neighbors who used to wave from porches crossed the street instead. At the diner, conversations cut off when I walked in. Even work got harder. One farmer canceled his hay order, saying he'd found someone more reliable. What he meant was someone less suspect. The hardest blow came from my own family. My sister showed up unannounced, standing stiff in the barn doorway. Mom says you're ruining us, she hissed. People are laughing at the name. At all of us. I'm not ruining anything, I shot back. I'm just living. Living! Her eyes burned. You're choosing this. With him. And you expect the rest of us to carry the shame? Shame. The word landed heavier than any fall. I almost told her to leave, but she'd already turned her back. Dust rose behind her truck as she drove away, leaving me alone with the animals in the silence that followed. That night I sat on the porch with my phone in my hand, staring at Carter's number. I wanted to call, to hear his voice, but the fear pressed in. Not fear of him, fear of what it would cost him if we kept going. He'd already been through enough in the city. Would I be the reason he lost everything again? The answer came the next morning, though not how I expected. I was hauling feed when Carter's truck pulled into the yard. He climbed out, calm but determined. We need to talk, he said. I wiped my hands on my jeans, heart hammering. Bad idea showing up here. People are watching. They already are, he said. Doesn't matter if we hide. Easy for you to say. You don't have family here cutting you off. You don't have a sister calling you a disgrace. His jaw flexed. You think it's easier for me? You think I haven't lost everything once already? The sharpness in his voice stopped me cold. He stepped closer. I didn't come here for peace. I came here to survive. And now I've found something worth more than survival. You think I'm going to walk away because a town full of cowards whispers? My chest tightened. It's not just whispers. They're saying you preyed on me. They're twisting it until I don't even recognize the story anymore. He didn't flinch. Then we tell our own story. I stared at him, stunned. You really believe anyone will listen? Maybe not all, but some. Enough. His voice dropped. I can take the heat. I've done it before. What I can't do is watch you tear yourself apart because you think you're alone. The words cracked something open in me. I'd been carrying the weight of silence my whole life, convincing myself it was armor. But all it had done was make me smaller, just like he'd said. I swallowed hard. And if standing up means losing everyone, then the ones you lose weren't yours to begin with. We stood there in the dirt, neither of us moving, the sound of restless horses filling the gap. For once, I didn't look over my shoulder to see if anyone was watching. I let out a shaky breath. I don't know if I'm ready. You don't have to be, he said. You just have to stop hiding. The choice hung heavy in the air, but for the first time it felt like a choice I could make, not one forced on me. That evening I drove into town with him beside me. Every head turned when we walked into the community hall for the weekend meeting. Murmurs spread like fire. I felt the old instinct to shrink, to keep my head down. But then Carter brushed his hand against mine, steady and grounding, and I lifted my chin instead. The mayor cleared his throat, ready to move on with business, but I spoke first. My voice shook, but it carried. You've all been talking about me, about him, about things you think you know. The hall went silent. Faces stared back. Neighbors, old classmates, even my sister in the back row. I took a breath. You want the truth? Here it is. I'm not ashamed. Not of him. Not of myself. If that makes you uncomfortable, that's your burden. I'm done carrying it for you. Gas rippled. Someone muttered, but I kept going. I've lived years trying to disappear so you'd accept me, and still you found ways to tear me down. So this is me, standing here, saying I won't vanish anymore. The silence that followed was heavier than the words. Carter didn't speak, didn't need to. His presence beside me was enough. The meeting moved on eventually, but nothing felt the same. I'd lit the fire. Now I had to face what it burned. The morning after the town meeting, Hollow Creek didn't look any different. The diner was still crowded, trucks still lined up at the gas station, and gossip still hung in the air. But for me, everything had shifted. Some people wouldn't meet my eyes anymore. Others stared longer than they should, like I was some kind of spectacle. And yet, a few nodded. Small, almost invisible gestures, but real. A rancher I barely knew tipped his hat as I passed. An older woman at the store quietly pressed my hand when she handed me change. They didn't say much, but the message was clear. Not everyone had turned against me. The ones who did made it loud. 2 men at the feed store muttered slurs under their breath. My sister refused to answer my calls, and my mother sent a letter that said nothing about love, only about disappointment. I read it once and folded it away. The hurt was there, sharp as a blade, but it no longer controlled me. What mattered was Carter. He stood steady through every glare and whisper, unshaken. The clinic lost a few patients, but he didn't bend. They'll come back when they need me, he said simply. And if they don't, I'll still be here. His calm was a lifeline. Still, the pressure wore on me. Nights were restless, thoughts circling. Had I done the right thing? Was the stand at the hall worth the isolation that followed? One evening, sitting on the porch with the field stretching out dark and endless, I asked him outright, "Do you think we'll ever be accepted here?" He thought for a long moment before answering. Accepted? Maybe, maybe not. But respected? Yes, because we didn't run. The truth of that settled deep. For years I'd hidden, hoping to keep the peace, and all it had brought me was silence. Now I was louder than I'd ever wanted to be, but at least it was my voice, not theirs. Days passed and the town adjusted in its way. The shock wore off. Some people avoided me. Others acted like nothing had happened. The gossip didn't vanish, but it dulled. I realized that scandal in Hollow Creek burned fast, but never forever. One Sunday I walked into the diner with Carter. The room quieted, forks pausing midair. My instinct was to turn back, but Carter kept walking, so I did too. We sat, ordered coffee, and didn't flinch. Halfway through the meal, Cole slid into the booth beside me. "You've got guts," he said, not meeting my eyes at first. "People will keep talking, but I'm sorry, I shouldn't have spread it." Anger sparked, but I let it fade. "You can't take it back," I said. "No, but I can stop adding to it." He finally looked at me. "And I will." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something. A crack in the wall that had boxed me in. Later that week, I went back to the community hall, not for a meeting, but for a volunteer day. I half expected to be turned away, but no one stopped me. We stacked chairs, fixed wiring, swept floors. A few people worked beside me without a word, but they worked. Sometimes that's all acceptance is, a willingness to stand side by side, even in silence. My family stayed distant. My mother's calls never came. My sister avoided me in the street. That wound stayed open, and maybe it always would. But for the first time, I didn't measure my worth by their approval. One night, Carter and I sat outside the clinic, the town quiet around us. He leaned back, arms crossed, gaze steady on the dark street. "You regret it?" he asked. I shook my head. It hurt, but it was the right thing. I'd rather live in truth than keep shrinking. He gave the faintest smile. That's all I needed to hear. The silence stretched, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was peace. Not the kind that comes from hiding, but from surviving the storm and still standing. Hollow Creek hadn't changed much, but I had. And maybe that was enough, because I knew now that the worst betrayal wasn't from friends or family or neighbors. It was from myself every time I stayed quiet. I wasn't quiet anymore. And no matter how long it took, that was how I'd carve out a place here. Not by vanishing, but by staying, by being seen, by refusing to disappear again.